What is the India story? It's the story of the world's biggest democracy.
We are developing the road infrastructure. In the end of 24, it will be equivalent.
Hello and a very warm welcome. You're watching Gravitas. Let's get started. Our cover story tonight is from China. It is about the former Chinese Foreign Minister Qin Gang. Was he a traitor? Has he been tortured to death? Did Qin Gang sell nuclear secrets to the West? We tell you why these questions are being raised. We also ask, why is China silent? What does this tell us about China's obsession with secrecy? What really happened to the former minister, and will we ever have these answers, considering it's China we are talking about? This and more coming up shortly on Gravitas. Also on the show for you tonight, we tell you all about the Canada theatre attacks. 3 attacks in less than 3 hours inside 3 movie theatres. All 3 attacks happened at theatres playing Hindi movies. What does this tell us about the safety of Indians and Indian interests in the country? We also tell you about the record-breaking droughts hitting the Panama Canal that are expected to cause major delays in Christmas supplies. We also tell you how Rishi Sunak is facing mounting trouble. And we ask, is there a way to defeat artificial intelligence at a time when it is being used to undress women and literally strip them of their dignity? We tell you about the need to protect women and children specifically. Our top story tonight is from Beijing. The sudden disappearance of the Chinese Supremo Xi Jinping's favorites in his cabinet. The highest Chinese officials, particularly close to Xi Jinping, mysteriously disappearing from their high-profile positions. In June, the former Chinese foreign minister was abruptly stripped of his title, remember. And following this, no one has seen him in public. There has been speculation, there have been questions about both his public and private life. And now, months later, it looks like we could be getting some answers. But it's bad news. According to the American news outlet Politico, a quote-unquote Stalin-like purge is being carried out in China. Let me repeat that. A Stalin-like purge. And Qin Gang may have been a victim of this purge. And that's not all, by the way. Beijing is swirling with allegations that the former minister was tortured to death and that he died in a military hospital in Beijing in late July. The report cited people with access to top Chinese officials as saying that Qin Gang died either from suicide or torture, or it could be suicide because of torture. The specifics are not yet known, but the conversation and the speculation is intense. And most intriguing, by the way, is the startling fact China has not said a word for someone who, when he joined the cabinet, was a star presence on the world stage. Was the real reason for his abrupt disappearance was his involvement in a serious scandal? A scandal also involving the defense minister, Li Shangfu, and the two generals who commanded China's rocket force. The charge is sensational. The three betrayed the country. They sold the Chinese nuclear secrets to the Western intelligence agencies, and the tip-off came from Russian Deputy Minister Rudinko. The Russian minister informed the Chinese President Xi Jinping about this treachery. Just a quick recap. The China Rocket Force, remember, oversees the country's nuclear weapons program. At the time when Qin went missing, the top commander of the Rocket Force, along with his deputy and former deputy, also reportedly disappeared. And it does not stop there. Several other senior officers serving and formerly serving were reportedly detained, and one of them died of unspecified illness. Eventually, the missing commanders were formally fired. They were replaced by officers from the Chinese Navy and the Air Force. This is in itself rare, as commanders of China's rocket force are usually promoted from within the service. Sometime after this purge, Li Shangfu, the man picked by Xi Jinping himself as China's minister in March this year, also vanished. Shangfu's dismissal was announced in late October. Nevertheless, Qin Gang's disappearance stands out. He was, after all, Xi Jinping's blue-eyed boy, the man behind China's wolf warrior diplomacy. And between 2014 and 2018, he oversaw most of Xi Jinping's interactions with foreign dignitaries. In the year 2021, in fact, he served as the Chinese ambassador to the US. 18 months later, he was named China's foreign minister. A rapid rise in the career for Gang, a sign of proximity with the CCP chairman Xi Jinping. In June this year, Gang held meetings with foreign ministers of Sri Lanka, Vietnam, Russia, and then he went off the radar. Reports linked his personal life with his disappearance. They said that he had an affair with a Chinese TV reporter. They said that he fathered a son who is a US citizen. According to reports, this affair and the quote-unquote illegitimate American child are one of the reasons for his purge. And if true, it tells us something new about China's ultra-secretive political system. It also gives us a glimpse into the Chinese Communist regime's inner workings. It has profound implications for the world, for the global economy, and even the prospects of peace in the region. According to this report, the signals coming from Beijing are unmistakable. China's security services are working overtime, and the goal is to repress to totalitarian levels. And for those of us on the outside of all this, it's almost impossible to know what's really happening inside the country. Naturally, when China's high-profile ministers go MIA quite unceremoniously, it demands attention. It's even more ominous because Gang and Shangfu were hand-picked and elevated just months before they went missing. According to this latest report, ever since Xi Jinping's reign began in 2012, many have been purged in a similar fashion. They say that from top to bottom, millions of officials have been removed from their posts. What also sets these purges apart is that the ones getting removed are not members of hostile political factions. They are loyalists, part of the inner ring. But if this is the political atmosphere in Beijing, it paints a very different portrait of Xi Jinping than previously perceived. It looks like he is isolated, alone, paranoid even. And if Xi Jinping is indeed isolated, then he can even provoke armed conflict with its neighbor, Taiwan. And that, you see, is the fear. According to the report, hundreds of senior officers in the People's Liberation Army, as well as thousands of top party officials, have been arrested, disappeared, or suicided. And what's common among all of them? Their unflinching loyalty to the people's leader. And it leaves us with many questions, to say the least. But the biggest and the most important one being, does Xi Jinping have any control over his party, cabinet, or his military? Who would be the next Dalai Lama? China has always tried to have the final say in the decision. There have been some new developments, and they are pointing at desperation. Chinese officials in Tibet are trying to woo their neighbors, it seems. They have been taking multiple foreign trips. Reports say late last month, the chairman of the Tibet Autonomous Region, Yan Jinhai, went on a multi-stop tour. Where to? To the Maldives, Thailand and Myanmar. His trip took a good 9 days, and right after this, Communist Party chief of Tibet, Wang Junzeng, went out. Reports say his visit was 10 days long. It covered Nepal, Sri Lanka and Singapore. What was the aim of these rare foreign trips, you ask? Well, depends on who you ask. The Chinese officials say it was to promote CCP's governance in Tibet, to boost trade and cooperation under the BRI. But if you notice something here, the countries that the officials chose to visit have significant Buddhist populations. So the question being asked is whether trying to build pressure on these governments is what's really happening. Analysts say that this might be Beijing's attempt to charm regional Buddhists and win their support for choosing the next Dalai Lama. You see, the dragon has been for long eyeing the Dalai Lama succession. It insists that it has the right to approve the appointments of all senior Tibetan Buddhist figures, and this includes the Dalai Lama and Panchen Lama. But Dalai Lama and his followers do not agree. They say that it is the decision that should be taken by the Tibetans. But then when has China let Tibetans decide their fate? Xi Jinping's China wants absolute control, so it has been on an image-boosting spree in Asia. Beijing is playing up its close cultural and historical ties with the neighboring states. Xinjiang party chief Ma Xingrui, for instance, has traveled several times to countries in Central Asia. How fruitful are these visits going to be is the immediate question. The institution of the Dalai Lama has its foundation in reincarnation. And traditionally, the Dalai Lama himself has chosen his successor. China wants to cherry-pick the next Tibetan spiritual leader. And by doing that, it wants to dilute the cultural and religious identities of Tibetans. The Dalai Lama is the spiritual head of Tibet. Until a decade ago, he was also the political head. The roots of this institution go back 6 centuries. And in this period, there have been 14 generations of Dalai Lamas. The current Dalai Lama was enthroned back in 1940. He was all of 4 at that time. He gave up his birth name and took a new one, Tenzin Gyatso. Tenzin Gyatso. Tibetans believe the Dalai Lama has control over his rebirth, that he can choose the body into which he will be reincarnated. But China wants to do that job. It wants to control the appointment of the 15th Dalai Lama. In 1950, China's communist government invaded Tibet. For the next 9 years, the Dalai Lama tried to evade China's full-scale military takeover of Tibet. On the 10th of March 1959, Chinese authorities extended a seemingly innocent invitation to the Tibetan leader. What for? To attend a theatrical show by a Chinese dance troupe, but only under certain conditions. And what were they? No Tibetan soldiers were to accompany the Dalai Lama. His bodyguards were to be unarmed. Anxiety befell the people of Lhasa. And soon, a crowd of tens of thousands of Tibetans gathered around the Norbolinka palace. They were determined to thwart any threat to their young leader's life. They did not let the Dalai Lama attend the event. Chaos followed. A week later, a few minutes before 10 at night, the Dalai Lama, disguised as a common soldier, slipped past the massive throng of people, along with a small escort. He headed to India. The Dalai Lama set up a government in exile in Dharamshala. China does not recognize his authority. No surprises there. China views the Dalai Lama as a separatist, someone who is trying to split Tibet from China. Inside Tibet, Dalai Lama's exile has created anger against China, which explains why Beijing wants to nominate its own Dalai Lama and tighten its hold on Tibet. Desperation is resulting in creativity and foreign visits. And for all we know, the world might end up having two Dalai Lamas, one that Tibet accepts and another that China nominates. Our next story is from Canada. On Tuesday, something unusual happened in and around the country's capital. There were 3 attacks in less than 3 hours inside 3 movie theaters. You know what these 3 incidents have in common? All 3 attacks happened at theaters playing Hindi movies. And this has triggered questions around the safety of Indians and Indian interests in Canada. Now, here's what we know so far. One of the incidents happened at around 9:20 p.m. local time on Tuesday. This is when a cinema complex in Vaughan was attacked by 2 masked men. Around 200 people were inside the theater watching a Hindi movie. The men in question disrupted the screening and sprayed an unknown aerosol-based irritating substance into the air. Many people started coughing and several others were treated for exposure to that substance. Investigators say the suspects fled the scene before the police arrived. The first suspect has been identified as a black man with a light skin tone. The second suspect has been identified as a brown man with a light skin tone. Now, this was not a standalone incident. A similar attack was reported in a theatre at Scarborough Town Centre in Toronto. It was attacked by unknown assailants who set off a stink bomb during a movie. The police saying that the theatre was evacuated and no injuries were reported. And lastly, there was another attack at a theatre in Brampton. This is in Ontario's Greater Toronto area. The attack followed a similar pattern. Some unknown men sprayed some sort of substance inside the theatre's premises. Officers evacuated the building and there were no reports of any injuries. The police saying they are liaising with officials in all 3 areas. They've also released these images. They show the suspects who sprayed the substance at the cinema in Vaughan. An investigation has been launched. A manhunt to nab the suspects is underway. The question is, were these 3 incidents linked? Were they some sort of hate crimes? Were they part of some sort of an anti-India plan? Well, this is what a police officer had to say. Coincidentally, they took place all within less than 3 hours on the same evening. So we are certainly looking into the possibility that these incidents are linked. There is no obvious indication that this is a hate-motivated crime, but we have notified our hate crime prevention unit as a precaution. Now, here's the thing. The timing of these incidents is striking, to say the least. They come amid a flurry of anti-India attacks and a growing anti-India sentiment. We've been reporting on this for months now. In September, they were threatened to leave. The threat was issued by Khalistani terrorist Gurpatwant Singh Pannu. He threatened Indo-Canadian Hindus, asking them to leave the country or face consequences. A month before this, in August, Khalistani terrorists attacked a Hindu temple. The act of vandalism took place in Surrey, near the Canada-United States border. The Khalistani terrorists also placed posters at the entrance of the temple, aiming to sow fear within the Hindu community. The poster advocated a referendum pertaining to the assassination of Hardeep Singh Nijjar, quote-unquote. And before that, on the 18th of June, a pro-Khalistani Twitter handle, Sikh Narrative, shared a video of different Hindu religious sites across Toronto where posters of Khalistani terrorist Talvinder Singh Parmar were placed. Now, it does not end there. Indians living in Canada have had to face not only desecration of their places of worship, but also death threats and relentless intimidation. The situation was bad before, but it has now escalated to an alarming degree. But what stings the most is the sheer hypocrisy of the Canadian government. While they claim to stand against hatred, their actions tell a completely different story. These events serve as a wake-up call to the unsettling truth. For the sake of quoting a small percentage of voters, Justin Trudeau has made a gamble. He has prioritized the interests of a small fringe element over the well-being of an entire community. And as these attacks unfold in Canada, back in New Delhi, the Indian government has made it stand clear that it will be unrelenting when it comes to matters of national security. And guess who has backed India's unwavering stance on national security? The president of Russia, Vladimir Putin. A video is going viral on the internet. It shows the Russian president praising the Indian Prime Minister, lauding him for his tough decision-making on national security. That's not all. He also said that relations between the two countries have been developing progressively and that the policy pursued by Prime Minister Modi is the main guarantor of bilateral ties. He said all of this at the 14th VTB Investment Forum, Russia Calling. Listen in.
I cannot imagine His Excellency Modi getting intimidated or being forced to take any steps or actions that would go against the national interests of India and the people of India. And there is pressure against him, I am aware of that. We never talk to him about that. I can see that. And to be honest with you, I am amazed at his strict position to defend the national interests of India. We do see that.
You heard that. I can't imagine that Modi could be intimidated, quote unquote. Going on to say, I'm surprised at his tough position to defend national interests. These are quite striking statements. No wonder they've gone viral. You see, the video we just played has amassed thousands of views online. Interestingly, this is not the first time that Putin has expressed his admiration for the Indian Prime Minister, by the way. Last month, in his address at the virtual G20 summit, he thanked India and the Indian Prime Minister for his good work during the chairmanship of the body. But this time, he has directly lauded the Prime Minister's decision-making on national security. What explains this? Well, from where we see it, this seems like Putin's master play. He seems to be making such statements because of tensions between India and the United States. Tensions primarily over Khalistani terrorists. You see, federal prosecutors in the US have accused India of planning to assassinate Gurpatwant Singh Pannun, the leader of the band Sikhs for Justice. The issue is highly delicate for both India and America, as both sides are trying to build closer ties in the face of an ascendant China, which is perceived as a threat for both democracies. And here's the thing. Biden's White House calls India a strategic partner. At the same time, it asks India to take action over unsubstantiated cases. If it considers India a partner, shouldn't it act like a partner and help India in its fight against terror? Shouldn't it reach out to India before making claims that lack evidence? Why is the US threatening India instead of being helpful? The Russian president seems to have sensed this hypocrisy. The fact that he said that Prime Minister Modi cannot be intimidated or forced only proves this. And the message seems to have reached Washington. According to reports, the director of the US FBI, Christopher Wray, will visit India next week. The planned visit is regarding the alleged plot to kill a Khalistani terrorist, which we just told you about. The trip will mark Wray's first visit to India since taking charge in 2017 and the first visit by an FBI director in 12 years. This is what the US envoy Eric Garcetti had to say about it.
Our Secretary of Treasury, this was the #1 country she went to outside the United States 4 times this year. Secretary of State just came here for the 3rd time. Secretary of Defense for the 2nd time. FBI Director is here next week.
But the question remains, is America shielding Gurpatwant Singh Pannun? Is it protecting him despite his threats against India? I mean, the man has openly threatened to bomb India's parliament. We wonder, how would have the Biden administration reacted if a similar threat was made? And why the hypocrisy? Think about it. Climate change could ruin your child's Christmas. You heard that right. Record-breaking droughts hitting the Panama Canal are expected to cause major delays in Christmas supplies, and this includes Christmas toys for children. So even if they have been on Santa's nice list, chances are that he might not be coming to town. Jokes aside, our next report looks at how this climate crisis is affecting trade routes. Take a look.
Climate change is stealing Christmas from the West. Let's point you to the Panama Canal. The crucial waterway is drying up as it battles a record drought. The 64-kilometer-long canal connects the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. The water level is at its lowest since the mid-1900s. The Panama Canal Authority has been forced to drastically cut the daily transit number. This has resulted in massive delays in shipping. Christmas cargoes are stuck. Santas and gifts are stranded. From smartphones and TVs to Christmas tree lights, this Christmas they could all arrive late. It gets worse. The Canal Authority believes it could take up to 2028 for the traffic to normalize. 2028 is 5 Christmases away. Zoom out and you will see the gravity of this crisis. This is not just a matter of fewer ships passing through the Panama Canal. It is about a complete reconsideration of global trade routes. Usually 38 ships navigate the canal daily. Now it's down to just 24, and soon perhaps only 16. Some companies desperate to get their goods across are paying millions to skip the queue. Others are taking long detours via Egypt's Suez Canal or the Cape of Good Hope in South Africa. It would usually take anywhere between 8 to 10 hours for a ship to pass the Panama Canal. Now it's taking 1 to 2 weeks. This crisis impacts food and energy prices too. Grains and fuels are also caught in the shipping nightmare. The ripple effects of this drought are far-reaching. It affects everything from our pockets to our plates.
British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak is in trouble. All signs of collapse and crumble are right there. He has made a complete mess of the Rwanda policy. His immigration minister has resigned. Factions have formed in his own party. And to do some damage control, he hastily called for a news conference, and then he managed to attract ridicule for himself. What is the leader doing? How is he going to save himself? He is desperately trying to get his controversial deportation plan off the ground, but Tories are not convinced. And just hours after the Prime Minister tabled a bill to save his Rwanda deportation policy, Immigration Minister Robert Jenrick call it quits. What for? Because the legislation did not allow the government to override the international laws and deport the immigrants. Generic said the law aimed at reviving the policy did not go far enough, quote unquote, and that the policy will face further hurdles in court. Senior Tories have warned Sunak that his plan is doomed to fail. Listen to what the former Interior Minister, Suella Braverman, had to say about the bill.
It is now or never. The Conservative Party faces electoral oblivion in a matter of months if we introduce... The Conservative Party faces electoral oblivion in a matter of months if we introduce yet another bill destined to fail. Do we fight for sovereignty, or do we let our party die?
You see, right-wing Tories want to ensure that the UK can act unilaterally, that it can send flights to Rwanda without any hurdles. Sunak is trying hard to appease the MPs, but he is struggling to deliver. And there is a rebellion boiling among the Conservatives. It's not just the right-wing members. There are 4 different factions, each with its own demands. What are these groups and how much of a threat are they to Rishi Sunak really? Number 1, One Nation. It was set up to represent the views of centrist Tories. Some of its prominent members are Justice Secretary Alex Chalk, Attorney General Victoria Prentice, Damien Green, Stephen Hammond and Matt Warman. The group claims to have a membership of over 100 MPs. Behind the scenes, senior figures in this group have made it clear that they would not support the Rwanda policy if Sunak went too far, as in if he disregarded the UK's international legal obligations. And this threat was one of the reasons why Sunak did not back the most hardline version of the bill. Faction number 2, European Research Group. It was once the most powerful and effective grouping of Tory MPs. But since Britain left the EU, it has struggled to maintain its relevance. Its leading figures are Bill Cash, Mark Francois, Craig McNally. This faction does not pose any significant danger to Rishi Sunak. Faction number 3 being New Conservatives. This one was set up in May this year and has brought together some disparate right-wing groups. It is led by 2 MPs, Danny Kruger and Miriam Cates. Both are devout Christians and open about how their religious beliefs influence their politics. Suella Braverman is also a part of this group. Despite being the newest caucus, it has caused waves by pushing for more radical measures to cut migration and reform taxes. New Conservatives pose the biggest challenge to Sunak's leadership. And lastly, we have the Conservative Growth Group. This one is forged out of Liz Truss's failed premiership. It is focused on the libertarian-style policies that MPs believe will boost the economy. Truss-era cabinet ministers Ranil Jayawardena and Sir Simon Clarke are among its leading figures. The former Home Secretary, Dame Preeti Patel, is also closely involved. So is Sir Jake Berry, who was party chairman under Truss. Some demands made by the group are cutting corporation tax and stamp duty, loosening planning regulations to build more homes, and resuming fracking. You see, all these factions put their personal views and interests over the broader party's objectives, and together they can make or break Sunak's premiership. And what is the British Prime Minister doing about this? He is politely asking his MPs to unite behind his Rwanda plan. The legislation will go to vote in the House of Commons on December 12, and Sunak is insisting that it would not be a matter of confidence in his government. He has also vowed that those voting against the bill will not be fired. It's like Sunak's premiership is hanging by a thread, to say the least. I have some numbers for you. An Express poll has revealed that almost 6 in 10 of all Tory supporters from the 2019 election have abandoned the party. That accounts for 58% of Conservative supporters. The poll also showing that trust in the government has dropped to 32%. Put simply, things are not going in Sunak's favour. With his hardline Rwanda policy, Sunak was hoping to win over right-wing Tories, but that clearly did not happen. One minister has already resigned. Sunak has also made one thing clear: if the government went any further in disregarding human rights law, Rwanda would simply abandon the deal. So what happens next? Will there be a civil war within his party? And is this the beginning of a rebellion among the conservatives? Picture this: a young soldier, only 25, full of life and promise. Gal Eisenkot, the son of a war cabinet minister, lost his life in northern Gaza. It's a story that has gripped the country. He was there in the thick of it when a tunnel shaft blew up. The news came in: injured, hospitalized, and then the devastating blow that he did not make it. Prime Minister Netanyahu conveyed his condolences and called him a hero. But he is not calling off the war. In fact, he is digging his heels in, talking about pushing forward. Meanwhile, this is not just about one soldier, one family's loss, of course. We are talking about numbers that make you pause and think. This Thursday, the Israeli army shared the names of 5 soldiers, including Eisenkot. They also revealed the total number of its military casualties. The total, a staggering 416 killed since the 7th of October. These figures are a jolt to the system. And as the recent war between Russia and Ukraine has shown us, the real count of the dead is often much higher. But Netanyahu remains on the warpath, and now he's got his toughest call to make. Is he going to send his troops into the tunnels of Gaza to cling on to power? These tunnels in Gaza, they are not just any battleground. It's where the risk skyrockets, and every move is a matter of life and death. Experts assess that the risk to Israeli troops would be at its highest, losing all conventional advantages. But then here's the thing: Netanyahu has got his back against the wall with corruption charges and critics at every turn. He is desperately fighting to hold on to power. And how does he do that? His critics say by taking down Hamas, but at what cost? Let's just get real for a moment here. If Israel decides to take this fight underground into these tunnels, it's a whole new ball game. We are talking about a maze, a web of dangers waiting around every corner. And let's not forget, Hamas knows these tunnels like the back of their hand. And then there's this twist. Reports are floating around that Israel might just flood these tunnels with seawater to avoid the ground fight altogether. But that, you see, brings in its own set of complications. Whatever the option, Netanyahu is seemingly got his eyes on the prize. Wipe out Hamas, no matter what it takes. So where does that leave us? French President Emmanuel Macron, over at COP28, threw in his 2 cents about the viability of Netanyahu's aims. He's saying that this fight against Hamas will take at least a decade to win. But can Israelis sustain it? A protracted war against an irregular force has never really panned out, the US itself being a case in point. But that's not all. Netanyahu stands firm, ready to battle it out with Hezbollah as well, if the need be, going as far as making threats that Israel will single-handedly turn Beirut and South Lebanon into Gaza and Khan Yunis. And the US, on the other hand, is seemingly trying to pull in the reins. But let's be honest, there is no easy way out of this. Even the White House has issued a clarification, highlighting that the US has not given a deadline to Israel concerning its combat operations in Gaza. An argument can be made that if the war ends now, Hamas is still there and still a threat. As Israel navigates these turbulent waters, one thing is for sure: they are hoping for a Hanukkah filled with light, not shadows of war. But the road to peace is winding, lined with challenges and hard choices. The nagging question remains: can peace be achieved? And at what cost? And for our next segment, we explored the good, bad and ugly of artificial intelligence. And this story, let me tell you, highlights the dangerous, ugly, dark side of AI. An alarming piece of news has come to light about how AI is being used to undress women. Once again, this shows us how, with all its capabilities, artificial intelligence can also strip you of your dignity. In fact, new research showing that apps and websites which use AI to strip women of their clothes are soaring in popularity. One network analysis company called Gravitas finds that in September this year, 24 million people visited undressing websites. Can you believe that? 24 million people. There are actual nudify services on the web, and they are not operating in secrecy, by the way. The research I just mentioned finds that since the beginning of 2023, the number of links advertising these undressing apps have risen more than 2,400% on social media. This includes X, formerly Twitter, and Reddit. I don't have to tell you how this dangerous technology works. Artificial intelligence, with all its prowess, is being used to recreate an existing image. It wipes out the clothes and undresses the subject, strips them of their dignity. And most of these perverse services are targeted at women. You all would know about the recent deepfake controversy in India. Famous Bollywood stars fell victim to the deepfake phenomenon. Actors Rashmika Mandanna, Deepika Padukone, Katrina Kaif, Alia Bhatt, Kajol, Priyanka Chopra Jonas. What happened? Their images were manipulated using AI-generated technology. In some cases, their voice was morphed. In others, obscene gestures were superimposed on them. Their famous faces put on others' bodies. Some would call it privacy violation, others identity theft. But it's women who are being targeted time and again, which makes this an issue about respect and dignity. And coming back to the research I mentioned, what would you call this? Online harassment? Call it what you will. The point is, AI is here to stay, and women are vulnerable to its unregulated threats. This was also something highlighted at the G20 summit hosted by India this year. India said in a statement that there is a need for transparent and accountable frameworks to govern artificial intelligence. Deepfake porn is another concern, by the way. Artificial intelligence can also be used to put your face on someone else's naked body. So unregulated AI is not just a threat for women, but also children. American high schools are witnessing a rise in victims of deepfake porn. Targets of deepfake pornography are mostly women and at times minors. One identity verification company, Sensity AI, says that the number of pornographic deepfakes online roughly doubled every 6 months from 2018 to 2020. The company added that a shocking 96% of deepfakes are sexually explicit. In America, there is no federal law banning the creation of deepfake pornography. We all know about AI and its capabilities, but with great power also comes great responsibility. So until artificial intelligence can be regulated, we need to protect women and children. And what about the basic right of women over their bodies? Let's take you to the United States. This is a story about a woman who sought abortion in the state of Texas. And if you have been watching this show regularly, you would know very well about where things stand in the US as far as abortion is concerned. What happened in this case and why has it been dominating headlines? What is the woman's story? Our next report breaking it all down for you.
This is Kate Cox, and her story has been dominating headlines in the United States. Why? Because of her fight to get an abortion. The mother of two is 20 weeks pregnant. Her fetus has been diagnosed with a chromosomal disorder. It is called trisomy 18. The rare but serious condition often results in stillbirth or early death of the infant. Kate Cox filed a lawsuit this week. In the lawsuit, she has said that her fetus was diagnosed with trisomy 18, and because she had 2 previous cesarean sections, she would need to have a third one if she continues the pregnancy. According to the lawsuit, this could jeopardize her ability to have more children, saying that she and her husband want to have more children in the future. According to her, doctors have said that continuing with the pregnancy poses a risk to her health.
Kate Cox's life and future fertility are at great risk, and according to her doctor, the medical care that she needs is an abortion. In the time between when this case was filed on Tuesday morning and our hearing today, Ms. Cox has had to visit the emergency room again, her 4th emergency room visit in the last month, for pregnancy symptoms including severe cramps, leaking fluid, and elevated vital signs. Today, we are seeking a temporary restraining order to allow Ms. Cox to get the abortion that she needs now to end her suffering and protect her fertility.
Texas law prohibits almost all abortions with limited exceptions. The abortion ban has only a narrow exception to save the mother's life or prevent substantial impairment of a major bodily function. Suing the state, Kate Cox sought a court-ordered abortion, and now a Texas judge has ruled that she can legally terminate her pregnancy, basically handing down a temporary restraining order allowing her to terminate her pregnancy and protecting her doctor from civil and criminal penalties if she performs the procedure.
I am going to grant the temporary restraining order for Ms. Cox, Mr. Cox, and Dr. Carson. The idea that Ms. Cox wants desperately to be a parent, and this law might actually cause her to lose that ability, is shocking and would be a genuine miscarriage of justice. So I will be signing the order, and it will be processed and sent out today.
This is a landmark moment. The debate over abortions has heated up since the United States Supreme Court last year allowed states to ban abortion. This lawsuit is believed to be one of the first attempts in the country by an individual seeking a court-ordered abortion since then. Where do the things go from here? Will lawyers for the state challenge the ruling? Will they ask a higher court to block the order? That remains the big question. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
Do you feel like everything you buy now comes at an exorbitant price? Just keeping your house running is burning a huge hole in your pocket. Be it a cleaning essential, a grocery item, a designer coat, or perhaps a new gadget, something that might have cost $10 a year, for example, is now available for $15. Yes, inflation is to blame, but you see, it's not the only culprit. There is more to this. There is corporate greed, and this greed is driving the prices up. It's called greedflation. Let me tell you all about it. You see, inflation is the rate at which the general prices rise, and just throw greed into this mix, and the problem only gets worse. When big corporate firms decide to exploit inflation, it's called greedflation. In the case of inflation, prices of goods go up to keep up with the production costs, logistics, wage hikes, and more. But at times, companies hike prices more than required to cover the increased costs. And they do this to maximize their profits. And this is greedflation. Let me just give you an example here. Say you want to buy some luxury product. Its price is $100, but there was an inflation of 10%. To keep up, the company needed to increase the price to $110, but the company felt greedy. So in the name of inflation, it hiked the price to $120. It did so only to make more profits. This is how greedflation works, and it further fuels inflation. It's a vicious loop. And why am I telling you about this? Because you may have fallen prey to it. Reports have found, in fact, that greedflation played a significant role in boosting inflation last year. According to an analysis of the financial accounts of many of the UK's biggest businesses, profits far outpaced increases in costs. And this pushed up inflation to levels not seen since the early 1980s. And which companies increased their profits the most? This is in comparison to the pre-pandemic average. For starters, it was the energy company ExxonMobil. Its profits of $18.8 billion increased to $66.5 billion. And then there was Shell. Profits rose from $20 billion to $55.2 billion. For mining firm Glencore, the jump was the most dramatic. Profits of $2.3 billion increased to $18.5 billion. You see, companies earned billions of dollars under the farce of inflation. Sure, the cost of living increased, but the price hikes were disproportionately high. All this while, workers were getting a double whammy. They suffered low wage increases as well as higher interest rates. Inflation has been bad as it is, but corporate greed, it seems, is the new villain in town. So what really is the solution? Some are calling for a global corporation tax to curb excessive profits. But will that actually become a reality? We will have to wait and watch. On that note, it's a wrap on this edition of Gravitas Tonight. This is me, Molly Gambhir, signing off. Thanks very much for watching. We're leaving you with Gravitas images. Have a good weekend.
From the botched coup
Israel woke up to a barrage of thousands of rockets fired from the Gaza Strip.
Hostilities have broken out between Israel and Palestine, and the tensions that had been gathering steam over the course of the last several weeks and months.
The siren has gone off. I don't know if you can hear in the background what's going on. I'm going into the shelter now. So it's a very, very serious situation here across Israel. It's a state of emergency.
The United States stands with Israel.
Well, we are starting this broadcast with a developing story from West Asia, where Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant says Hamas has launched a war against the state of Israel.
It's easy to tell you a flat story. It's easy to show you what's happening around the world. We do the difficult part.
This weapon has been banned, but the US, Ukraine and Russia do not find the bombs problematic.
We also tell you why what's happening.
New drug is making a difference in the fight against Alzheimer's. This medicine helps slow down a patient's cognitive decline.
We look beyond the text. We give you context.
Is China preparing for a war in the Himalayas? And tonight, we come to you with some proof.
Hypocrisy is stunning.
Do leaders mean what they say? Do they ever say what they mean? To find out how real news affects you, your decisions.
Just when Iran took one step in the right direction, its moral police is planning to drag it further back. And once again, the victim will be women.
Watch Gravitas.
And thanks for tuning in.
We don't impose our views.
Did India threaten to ban Twitter? Either that or Jack Dorsey is lying to you.
That is Gravitas. We let life breathe through our show. Gravitas, the informed show for an intelligent audience.
Hello, welcome to This World. Vladimir Amelyan joins us from Kiev, and he is currently on the front line fighting Russian troops.
We believe that the world should be ruled by democracies.
I was interviewing you on television a couple of weeks back.
That's right.
And you said, if you really want to understand Jerusalem, why don't you come here and see it?
And you came.
Here I am.
Mass shooting after mass shooting after mass shooting. Why this cannot be fixed?
There are 425 million guns in the United States, which is more than the population.
The problem here is Trump has been able to make the argument that this is a political prosecution and that he's being singled out unfairly.
Defend our nation.
You are saying we could have a cure for cancer.
We'll have treatments for many cancers in this decade, and they're going to come from India.
Downside